Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of the cocaine mummies, Egyptian mummies with South American drugs in their systems. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. In 1992, German forensic toxicologist Svetlana Balabanova published a finding that sent shockwaves through Egyptology. She had tested 9 Egyptian mummies from the Munich Museum using established forensic methods, the same techniques used in criminal drug testing, and found cocaine, nicotine, and hashish in their hair, skin, and bone. Cocaine and tobacco are plants native to the Americas. Their presence in Egyptian mummies dated to between 1070 BC and 395 AD should be impossible. Egypt and the Americas had no known contact. Columbus was 3,000 years away. The scientific establishment's initial response was dismissal, contamination, laboratory error, misidentification of similar alkaloids. But subsequent independent testing confirmed nicotine in additional mummies. The cocaine metabolite benzoylecgonine, which only forms inside the human body after cocaine consumption and cannot result from external contamination, was present. The findings have never been definitively refuted. They have simply remained unexplained. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the wider world of ancient technological anomalies, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. Ancient technical knowledge is remarkably vulnerable. It lives in the hands of craftsmen, in the minds of engineers, in the institutional memory of workshops and guilds. When a civilization collapses through invasion, plague, climate change, or internal conflict, that knowledge can vanish within a single generation. There is no guarantee that what is written down will be preserved, and much ancient knowledge was never written down at all. It was transmitted orally, apprentice to master, in a chain that a single catastrophe could permanently sever. This vulnerability helps explain what might otherwise seem impossible, that the ancient world possessed capabilities we did not recover for centuries or millennia. The Romans knew how to make self-healing concrete by mixing volcanic ash with seawater. When the empire fell, the recipe was forgotten. Medieval European builders worked with inferior materials for over 1,000 years before the technique was rediscovered through analysis of surviving Roman structures. The knowledge did not disappear because it was suppressed or hidden. It simply died with the people who held it. Apply this principle more broadly, and the anomalies of the ancient world become less mysterious, not in the sense of being explained, but in the sense of being plausible. If Rome could lose a concrete formula for a millennium, what else might have been lost? What might advanced cultures in earlier epochs have discovered and then lost, leaving only fragmentary traces? A strange artifact here, a suggestive diagram there, that later generations would struggle to interpret. This is the question at the heart of every anomalous discovery from the ancient world. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the cocaine mummies, Egyptian mummies with South American drugs in their systems, is more extensive more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The Cocaine Mummy study was published in 1992 in the peer-reviewed journal Naturwissenschaften by Svetlana Balabanova, Franz Parsch, and Werner Persig. Balabanova was a forensic toxicologist at the University of Ulm, with expertise in detecting drug metabolites in biological tissue, methods directly applied from forensic investigation of living individuals to the analysis of preserved mummified remains from the Munich collection. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes, but as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered 9 Egyptian mummies were tested in the original study. The researchers found cocaine, nicotine, and hashish or cannabis in the hair, soft tissue, and bone of multiple specimens. The mummies were dated from approximately 1070 BC to 395 AD, spanning over 14 centuries of Egyptian history. The cocaine metabolite benzoylecgonine was the most forensically significant finding because it is produced only within the living human body during cocaine metabolism. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine cocaine is derived from the coca plant, native to South America. Tobacco is derived from Nicotiana species native to the Americas. Neither plant was known to exist in Africa, Europe, or the Middle East prior to European contact with the Americas after 1492, more than 15 centuries after the latest mummy in the sample was preserved. The presence of these substances in Egyptian tissue presents a direct challenge to the established timeline of Old World and New World contact. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation, but the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, the initial reaction from Egyptologists and archaeologists was that the findings must reflect contamination, modern cocaine or tobacco residue deposited on the mummies through handling by museum staff, conservation treatments, or environmental exposure. Rosalie David of the Manchester Museum was among those who initially challenged the findings on contamination grounds and coordinated additional testing of British Museum mummies. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of independent testing conducted at the University of Birmingham subsequently confirmed the presence of nicotine in one mummy, Henut Toy, using separate laboratory analysis. Some Old World plants in the Solanaceae family do contain trace nicotine-like alkaloids, providing a possible source for nicotine that does not require American tobacco. The cocaine finding is harder to explain by Old World plant alkaloids because benzoylecgonine is a metabolite specific to cocaine processing in the human body. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. Thor Heyerdahl's raw expeditions of 1969 and 1970 demonstrated that ancient-style reed boats could cross the Atlantic Ocean from Africa to the Americas, covering over 6,000 kilometers using wind and current patterns available in antiquity. Heyerdahl was not arguing for cocaine trade specifically, but his crossings established the physical possibility of Atlantic contact in the pre-Columbian period as a matter of practical demonstration rather than theoretical argument. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations. And in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the cocaine mummies, Egyptian mummies with South American drugs in their systems. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that contamination, modern cocaine or tobacco, reached the mummies through museum handling, conservation chemicals, or inadvertent exposure, and the analytical methods produced false positives or identified contaminating substances rather than material incorporated into the tissue during the individual's life. This was the initial mainstream response, but it is increasingly difficult to maintain given that benzoylecgonine forms only inside a living body and cannot be introduced through external contamination after death. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that direct transatlantic or trans-Pacific trade contact between ancient Egypt and the Americas, operating through routes and by peoples unknown to conventional history, enabled the movement of American plant products to the Old World centuries or millennia before Columbus. Balabanova's findings imply this conclusion, and researchers including Wiedemann and Beher have proposed that coca leaves were traded via now-lost intermediary networks. No physical evidence of such a trade network has been found. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that Old World plants now extinct or regionally eliminated contained alkaloids similar to cocaine and nicotine in concentrations sufficient to produce the detected metabolite signatures. And Egyptian medical practitioners used these plants in ways that would leave detectable residues in mummified tissue. Some Solanum species contain nicotine. No known Old World plant contains cocaine or produces benzoylecgonine. This explanation accounts for nicotine but not cocaine. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the cocaine mummies, Egyptian mummies with South American drugs in their systems, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes Balabanova's analytical methodology, radioimmunoassay followed by gas chromatography mass spectrometry confirmation, is the forensic gold standard used in criminal drug testing and cannot easily be dismissed as amateur or technically flawed. The two-step confirmation process is specifically designed to eliminate false positives, making the straightforward contamination explanation difficult to sustain without identifying a specific contamination mechanism that could defeat both analytical stages. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented independent confirmation of nicotine in the Henut Tory mummy by the University of Birmingham using separate laboratory analysis provides the strongest evidence that the original findings reflect genuine tissue content rather than Balabanova's laboratory contamination. When a second independent institution confirms a finding using separate samples and methods, the single laboratory contamination explanation becomes substantially less plausible. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed Rosalie David and colleagues at the Manchester Museum tested additional mummies in response to the controversy, and results were mixed. Some mummies showed evidence of similar substances, others did not. This inconsistency is consistent with individual variation in substance use across a population sample rather than uniform contamination, though it also leaves open the possibility of selective contamination affecting some specimens more than others. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the cocaine mummies, Egyptian mummies with South American drugs in their systems. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. The cocaine mummy debate has not been definitively resolved. The contamination explanation has become increasingly strained as independent testing confirms the findings. But the transatlantic contact hypothesis required to explain the findings has found no supporting physical evidence in the form of American plant material in Egyptian contexts or Egyptian material in American archaeological sites. Pre-Columbian transoceanic contact is a minority position in academic archaeology with a growing body of circumstantial evidence, including botanical and genetic data from Pacific contact between Polynesia and South America. Balabanova's findings remain published and unreplicated in either direction. They are one of the most uncomfortable empirical results in modern Egyptology, and the field's response has been to largely stop discussing them. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the cocaine mummies, Egyptian mummies with South American drugs in their systems, from the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of cocaine mummies ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.